Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about a really cool game called Fallout Wasteland Warfare. I know a lot of people are watching the show right now on Amazon, and I thought this would be a good time to kind of share how to play with everybody. We're going to do this over a series of videos. This is episode 1. Before we dig in, this game was made by Modifius, and if it's something you're interested in or if it's something you like and you want to pick up some more models, I will have an Amazon link in the description for this box you see on your screen. It's the Brotherhood of Steel T45 Heavy Armor. I will continue to expand my Amazon affiliate links again. It doesn't cost you anything extra to do it, and it gives me a small kickback. So it's one of those where you get to get cool minis and play a cool game. It doesn't cost you any extra money, and you get to support me. Thank you. Our overview, we're going to cover the basics. This video is going to be very simple and really just kind of touch on the fundamentals or the foundation of the game. We're going to talk about the measurement markers, special attributes, skill tests, units and models, and then game structure. We're going to talk about a round overview and then activating models and readiness. And then our next episode is going to cover actions in a little bit more detail. Measurement and markers. So, Wasteland Warfare actually uses color coded rulers to measure distances. And then there's also different symbols that could annotate to different things to let a player know what action or skill corresponds to the color. In addition to being color coded, the official rules the official rulers also have different shaped edges to help differentiate between the rulers and their sizes. On the screen, you can see a picture of the rulers. And then the big thing to note is that the orange ruler is 2 inches, and then each ruler just goes up in a 2-inch increment. So orange is 2, yellow is 4, green is or red is 6, sorry, green is 8, blue is 10, black is 12. In addition, you're going to see different symbols, and those will correspond to different things. So if you see a spyglass or magnifying glass, that's going to be your search. So if you see an orange magnifying glass, that means you have a search range of 2 inches, for example. In the picture of the paladin at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that he's got a yellow square with a triangle in it. The triangle corresponds to your move distance. And the yellow means it's 4 inches, so he could move 4 inches. We'll cover this in a little bit more detail, but the main thing to note is that your 4 inches is actually going to be like 6 inches because you don't measure front to front in this game, you leapfrog. So, again, we'll cover it in the next episode a lot more detail, but just to give everybody that heads up, if things look like they're not as far as they should be, it's because it's already taken into account that you're gaining extra movement by measuring front to back. If you're not familiar with Fallout through video games or any other medium, I'm sorry, you're doing yourself a disservice. They use a set of attributes called special, and that's strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. These are the stats that help define your units and your models. And if it looks like it's a lot, that's because this game actually started as a kind of like a role playing game, and then slowly the tabletop and the role playing game kind of got their own separate rules, but they still interact very similarly, if not the same. I haven't looked at the role playing side of it in a while. I'll probably be doing that soon as well. We're focusing on the tabletop side. And so it's one of those where it looks like a role playing game to some degree because it largely kind of was. But if you've ever played a game like Necromunda, you'll note that there's also just a lot more stats in that game as well. And this is kind of just a similar interaction. Your strength determines your proficiency in close combat. And a lot of these are just going to make sense. Your perception does affect your ability with a ranged weapon, but it's also used for things like detecting enemies and then finding traps or loot. Your endurance is a measure of your toughness and also how much damage you can take before death. Charisma is just used for a variety of skill tests. They will tell you when you need to use it. Intelligence is primarily used for lockpicking and hacking or using terminals. Your agility determines how nimble you are and can affect your combat skills, but it's not usually the default. So agility would be a special situation if it affected your combat. Luck is how lucky you are, and this just has different effects on the game. Let's talk about skill tests. In Wasteland Warfare, we use a special 20-sided die, simply referred to as a skill die. And if you look at the Fallout package of dice, it's a 20-sided die with different numbers and symbols on it. You could theoretically use a standard 20-sided die, but you would need to make a table to kind of set the tone for this is what this number means, this is what this number means. In order for a skill test to succeed, you will roll the skill die, which is the white d20, and then the final die roll after any modifiers must be less than or equal to the corresponding special attribute that relates to the skill. For example, the paladin below would need a 7 or less to shoot its pistol or its rifle because its pistol and rifle skills correspond to perception, and the paladin's perception is 7. Attribute tests will work the same way. They simply use the base attribute listed, and then all bonuses and penalties adjust the skill value or the target number, and those are totaled before being applied to the skill being used or the attribute being used. What this means is that in most situations, I know it says all, and that's exactly as it's written in the rule book, but in most situations, the target number is what gets modified. And the only time it isn't is if it says otherwise. So if something were to give you like a -2 penalty, that's going to lower your target number, not the die roll. And then those are all totaled before being applied to the skill. And so what you'll do is you'll look at all your modifiers, you'll add them all up, and then if the adjusted target number or skill value is less than 1, you can only succeed if an exclamation point is rolled, which we're going to cover pretty soon here. There are other things, such as accuracy effect dice, that do modify the die roll instead of the target number. And anytime this is a situation where it modifies the die roll, the rules will explicitly state this modifies the die roll. So if it doesn't say, then it always affects the target number. And then if it does say, it'll tell you what it affects. A good example of this is the accuracy effect dice, like I said. And those accuracy effect dice will just have a minus and then an X, X being like a 1 or a 2. So it could be -1 or -2, and that will lower the die roll instead of the skill value. So you would check your skill value, you would apply all target number modifiers, then you would roll your die, then you would apply all die roll modifiers, and then you would check to see if you are below the target number. When you're rolling a skill check, there are times you will use effect dice, and these and skill check dice will be talked about. If the skill check is failed, meaning your die roll after all modifiers is higher than the target number, then any effect icons that are rolled are ignored, with the exception of if you roll a cog or vault door icon that's effectively what the vault door looks like. So if you see a little cog on your die, that's what I'm talking about. If you roll that, then you still get your action point, which we'll talk about in a minute. If the X is rolled on the skill die, it is always a failure and cannot be adjusted by numerical bonuses. And then you'll notice that some unit cards have specialties, and specialties just infer a +2 to the skill value that corresponds to the specialty. And a good example of this is if you had some sort of specialization in pistols, for example. If you have a pistol specialization, but your perception is 7, you get to add 2 to the 7 when using a pistol to make it a total of 9. So you would need a 9 or less when making a skill check with a pistol. If a model does not have a specified skill icon on their unit card, it cannot make that skill check. So if you don't have a terminal, like the terminal icon, then you cannot attempt to interact with terminals. And that's just one example. If for whatever reason you didn't have some sort of ranged attack skill, you couldn't make ranged attacks. We're going to talk about the skill die first, and then we're going to talk about the effects dice. The skill die is numbered 2 through 10, and if you roll the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, that is the pre-modified result of your skill check. You then proceed to apply all relevant modifiers to determine success or failure. Remember that lower is better in this game, and honestly, if any of you have played almost any kind of tabletop war game or even a role-playing game, all of this is going to sound and look very familiar. On that skill die is a cog or vault door, and that is the action point. If you roll that, that cog or vault door counts as a die roll of 1, and in addition, it counts as 1 action points. There are some models that can use action points to carry out quick actions in addition to their main actions, and we're going to talk about that in the second episode, which is the actions video. If you get the exclamation point, that's the critical point. That also counts as a result of 1, and it also gives you 1 critical point. Some models can use weapons that have critical effects once enough critical points have been banked. So you kind of bank them and then you spend them in order to trigger critical effects on some of your weapons and items. If you see a X or an X and the vault door, that's a fail, and that is regardless of modifiers. But if you get the vault door, you still get an action point. So if you get the X and vault door symbol, you fail, but you get an action point, which you could use to carry out a quick action if your model or unit has access to those quick actions. Now we're going to talk about the effects dice. This is going to be a pretty quick conversation because each one has its own special symbols, and we're not going to break them all down, mostly because the things in the game that use them will kind of tell you how they interact. The effects dice are 12-sided dice, and they determine what, if any, extra effects happen. So you have a black damage die, which will, in most situations, just increase the damage of an attack. You'll have a green accuracy die, and that will modify the skill roll. Remember, that's the roll, not the target number. This is one of the few exceptions. You'll have the yellow armor reduction dice, and that will have different symbols that can help reduce the effectiveness of your target's armor. You'll have the blue special effect dice, which can trigger a weapon's special effects. And then you'll have a single test. A single test may not gain more than 4 dice of the same color. Any excess are simply lost. So if you had a bunch of things that stacked and gave you 5 damage effect dice and 3 armor reduction dice, you'd still get the 3 armor reduction dice, but you could only get 4 of the 5 damage effect dice. Basically, you can't have more than 4 of one type of effect die modifying or affecting your roll. We're going to talk about damage, accuracy, and armor reduction dice probably in episode 2 when we talk about combat in a little bit more detail. Now we're going to talk about game structure and readiness. It's going to seem a little weird when we first start talking about it, but by the time we get to the end, everything's going to make a little bit more sense. So each game is played over several rounds, just like pretty much every other game at this point. At the start of the round, each player should have 0 ready tokens on the table. And if you look to the screen on the right-hand side, you'll see a blue ready token and a gray used token. There should be none of those on the table at the start of the round. And then you start with the player that has the advantage marker. And the player with the advantage marker is usually going to be the player with the fewest models on the table. So the player with the advantage marker places 1 ready token, which would be blue side up, next to any one of their models. Once that ready token is next to their model, that player chooses to either activate all of their ready models or pass. Once that player has either activated all of their ready models or passed, play passes to the other player and they do the same. Like I said, it sounds a little goofy. We're going to break it down just a little bit more. As I just said, once a player has placed a single ready token, they either activate all ready models or pass. If the player passes, the blue ready token stays. It just sits there next to that model, blue side up. Nothing happens. You're effectively putting a ready token next to a model and saying, I'm not doing anything, your turn. Your opponent then places a single ready token and does the same thing. They either choose to activate or pass. If the player chooses to activate, that player must activate all ready models. So you must, if a model on your side has a blue ready token, not a gray one, but a blue one, then when you activate a ready model, everybody with a blue token must activate that turn. Once they're activated, you'll flip to the gray side to show that they've activated, and you'll perform any and all actions you wish to perform with that model. And then you're going to continue activating ready units until all of them have activated, and you only have models with either gray tokens or no tokens. And this, like I said, it seems kind of weird at first, but what it means is that if you've got 5 models, you could choose to bank 3 activations and then activate 3 of your models at once, leaving 2 left to activate later. Or you can simply do them one at a time. And I really like this setup for the system. I think it rewards, knowledge and skill, understanding when and how to bank your activations, understanding the reward for having action economy as well. If I've got 10 models and you've got 5 models, I can afford to bank a few, or I can just activate my trash units first, for lack of a better word, and save my good units for after you've done all your activations. Because once a player has activated all of their models, they're done while the other player gets to finish out their turn. That's going to wrap it up for today. Like I said, in the next episode, we're going to take a look at actions, and that's going to be moving, shooting, charging, and close combat. We're going to talk about damage and armor as it pertains to both shooting and close combat, and we're going to talk about measuring. Big shout out to Kevin. Thanks a lot, man. Real Donnie G, Jamie, and my immortals, Lord Wellingstone, Danny Boy, and Captain Too Tall. I appreciate the support. Thank you.